Homies, let me tell you, I do not even get it at this point. You'd think that after hitting 6 different PRs last week, all in a row, while dealing with some slight minor tweaks in the shoulder, that peak week, because that was block 2. This is day 1 of actual peak week, would not peak, you know? And I'm not going to sit here and tell you I feel peaked, because that's far from the truth. Every time you hit some sort of max out or new level weight that you never expected, whether it's on the peak week or not, typically the day you come back after taking some rest throughout, after doing so many days in a row throughout whatever block you were on in your training, I find that, along with your CNS to a point, mainly your joints are just so much more worn down. I don't feel at risk of injury whatsoever, and I didn't feel any pain today whatsoever, which is a great thing considering last week kicking me in the ass almost every other day. It gets a lot harder to be explosive, and it gets a lot harder to lock out as strongly as you'd want to, because I can use as much boulder shoulder strength as I want, but if my elbows, if the joint in my elbow cannot maintain the strength that it needs to fully press through and lock out, feel like I'm pushing through the ceiling type feeling, things are not going to move. And it was definitely a slow start. On snatch, I wanted to really emphasize the third pull, mainly just the speed of getting under the bar because of that limiting factor. I don't like shying away from things that I feel weak at. I like committing to them and doing them just a little bit harder. It doesn't mean I have to have more weight on. I don't want to hit anything heavy like that. I just want to push the technique as much as I can so that the next time I come in, it's easy when I feel ready for it, right? Because that's at least in my mind what it means to create the best opportunity of success, that next new step. I had a failed rep at 185 and 205. I could not get it down. Mainly my lockout and my speed just was not there like it's been throughout the last peak, because you're not always going to be peak. Quite frankly, there is no peak in my mind. You're continuously fighting for that next highest chance, but typically, even when you max out, that's still not your peak. You're going to always have something left in the tank, and whether you don't have enough strength or not, there's too many factors that limit us to say that we were at 100% or didn't have enough that day, when we know that whatever you've been through in the day, the week, the month, whatever, there are so many thousands of things limiting you in certain small, tiny ways that rather than nitpicking them and giving yourself less credit, you just work with the absolute most you got that day. So at the very least, I'm very proud that I got up to 255 on my hang snatch. By no means is that the heaviest hang snatch that I've hit. The heaviest was actually 265, so it's pretty damn close, but it felt really good to be able to at least bring it back. I got a really good rep at 225. I was mainly just struggling to keep it locked out right over the top of my spine. The lack of elbow stability was letting it go a little bit behind when I caught it. But at the very least, we got through it. I could feel my shoulders start to weigh really heavy on that 255 rep. So that's when I kind of had the thought of like, okay, this is the one where the technique is going to start going down if I keep going up. Let's hit this one really good, do it right, and leave it there. You have to have the mental and physical confidence as well as your standard of good technique per that day in order to at least earn that next attempt. I don't care if the attempt is too heavy. I care if I've earned it in my mind, according to my experiences, according to my standards every single day. So at the very least, 225, I'm blowing that weight out of the water nowadays. 255 is becoming the new easy top heavyweights. And hopefully that starts transitioning really well. I have no idea if I'm going to start hitting 275 consistently, but at the very least, I can say I'm making strides. Snatch balance for a top single. I'm thinking that next program cycle, I'm not going to do any accessories or, complex movements for my snatch balances and my front squats. I really want to isolate the strength in those next time, because I get enough accessory work during my complex back squat days like today at the end. And I only have 1 day a week each for where I can focus in the catch position of the clean and the snatch, right? So at the very least, today was very low-key. Whatever I hit is whatever I hit. It's peak week, but I'm not going to force a max out. However, even though I didn't have the speed for the full body whip when it came to the full snatch, being able to start from my back made it a lot easier to lock my core in, because if there's one thing that has been very consistently strong this past week and last week, it's my squat. The stability of my squat has been insane. I am very ready for a PR, and that's not even me saying it because I'm excited for it. There's just no way that I'm not, because I repped my last 1-rep PR, my last heavy squat day, 475 for 2, and we'll get to what I hit on that in a minute, but it's going up. But regardless, the biggest thing I was concerned about was committing to the catch underneath the bar without losing consistency in the fall. The snatch balance is especially important because, of course, you're going to get the lockout, but if you're just training overhead lockouts, you don't have to do the squat. I wanted the core stability and the CNS work along with that lockout to emulate how much I need to press through the bar, feeling like I'm holding the ceiling up for when I do my next heavy snatches. Get that mind-muscle connection really grinded in the back of my brain. And every weight got easier and easier. This is the most consistent it's felt. And if you remember, last time I did a max out overhead squat, because this is my first time doing snatch balances in a program, I did 335, but my lockout was incredibly bad. My left elbow looked like it came out of the socket and popped back in. I literally can't replicate what happened because of how far it jutted out. And I think that it strained the hell out of the ligament and the joint in that elbow, because then I went to that competition and bombed out because of it, So this is at least the next best successor that I could have asked for to not only heighten my lockout and my explosiveness and my CNS, but continue to grow my technique through it, because it's more difficult, And it's a lot more consistent when it comes to knowing exactly when I can drop it. If I did the snatch balance and it was too heavy, at the very least, I can drop it immediately when I feel my elbow or shoulder giving out. On overhead squat, it's so much harder because it's 2 lifts in 1, where I want to commit to the overhead jerk so bad that sometimes even if I'm in pain, I stick it out for way too long. I got to 315 today. And whether that's a PR or not, I don't know, because I haven't trained snatch balance in years. But what I do know is that is the easiest 315 I have ever hit on a snatch exercise, period. That is growth. Otherwise, I chilled out for a minute. There's zero stress in my body right now. I don't feel sore at all. Everything is very primed. Despite my mental and my energy not being as primed, and my joints and my CNS are definitely going to have to get used to the weights again through these technique and conditioning days, I'm still peaked. Back squat was crazy because I wanted to keep it simple. It's peak week, so I like giving myself the availability to go heavy through an easier variation without making it too strenuous on my body for when I can go heavy again the next time. My biggest goal when it comes to accessories or complexes or variations is not to gain strength per se. It's to maintain the overall strength in the lift, but increase the strength in my CNS and my technique and my explosiveness, right? So I just wanted to do one really nice pause heavy single. It's peak week, so I'm only doing singles this week. Didn't even think about it. And I could already tell by the time I got to 365 that it was going to be another PR kind of day. Not only is 255 being easier on snatch than it's ever been, I didn't have to think about it. I could just make that jump now. That used to be scary weight. 315 snatch balance, never done that in my life, or thought I was going to be able to do it today. And back squat, after doubling 475 last max squat day, last week, I now can pause rep 475, at least for a top single once. But I'm telling you, it was confident. Very, very confident. It felt as easy. And when I say easy, it doesn't mean light. The weight is always going to be heavy no matter how light it seems. The bar can feel heavy sometimes when my CNS isn't primed. But when I say easy, I mean that the technique, the hip stability, the explosiveness, everything was there. Just the way I could have wanted it, My knees have no more pain. The pain will probably come back at some point, but at the very least right now, it's working. So I have to use it while it's there, right? So I killed it. I killed it. This is some of the best back squat. Overall, this is the best lifting I have ever done in my life. And I know that I've earned it. I know that I put in the work for it. I don't know if the next day is going to go better because, last week clean and jerks hurt my shoulder every single day. It still might be there. There's definitely a bit of a click there now, but, I'm giving it the time it needs to rest. I took an extra rest day these past 2 days. I'm stabilizing it every day in my stretches and my resistance band exercises, so I'm putting in my due diligence, and at the very least I have the best shot possible. So if clean and jerks aren't going tomorrow, I'm probably not going to push it at all, and so I can at least get some front squats and bench press going, because I haven't front squatted in over a week, and that is scary, almost 2 weeks. So I'm very curious to see if the mysterious 405 might happen tomorrow, because I've been chasing that number on front squat for a long while. But anyway, the biggest thing is that throughout everything I've ever done, when it comes to programming, when it comes to writing my weights out, what I want to do every day, because you guys know, when it comes to especially these conditioning technique days, when I come up with a complex or variation, I always come up with the complex or variation that I'm doing for that day literally 30 minutes before I go to the gym, because I want it to be something that I can get excited for in the moment. Whatever pops into my brain that I don't have any standard for, I don't know how it's going to go, but I know it's going to push me and make me have to come up with some new ways to adapt in the moment. And that's how I treat programming. I tell you guys all the time, I'm all about, fucking around and finding out. I don't like writing percentages. It makes me feel restricted and limited to what I can do, because when a peak comes in weightlifting, it's never going to tell you when it's coming. It comes and then it's gone. So I at least want to use and abuse it while it's there. Because, again, if there's no peak this week, that's fine. I already hit it last week, but I at least did it while I had it. And I think that you're at the least risk of injury when you take advantage of your true peaks when they're there, rather than forcing them when you're not feeling up to it. I really think that nobody should ever stay on the same program, period. You should never have your program be stagnant, and that's obviously my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. Learn how to go through this shit yourself. Everybody learns weightlifting in their own way. But throughout all my experiences and seeing all these different people lifting and watching myself grow, because of all these recordings I have of myself, I can actually see how crazy the growth has been and how fast I've grown in certain areas. Which programs made me grow the fastest. And if you guys remember, back a year and a half ago, Jesus, it doesn't feel like it's been that long since I moved from Orlando, but it's been a while. But you guys remember, I recovered my left quad tendon almost exploding. There's definitely a minor tear, because there's always going to be some pain in that knee from now on, because I did some permanent damage to it. But the last program I hit before my knee exploded in Orlando was one where I went heavy as often as I wanted, as long as I felt up to it. Now, the way that I did it back then was flawed, because no matter how burnt out my CNS was, I still pushed it to the absolute limit and didn't listen to my body when it was dying. I didn't take days to focus on technique and relax and then come back better the next day. I always wanted to do something bigger every single day. You have to be able to let go sometimes when it comes to messing around and letting the weights come to you without writing any strict percentages down throughout the weeks. And that's probably why my quad tendon ended up exploding, because even though I got injured from it, I had never seen such fast growth so quickly. My back squat exploded from I think my PR for a single was 425 at the time, barely. And then 420, 425, maybe 415 even. And then within a matter of 2 to 2.5 months, I still remember to this day, I hit 455 for 2. And at my very highest peak, I did 445 for 4. Still like today, no belt, no sleeves. That was a year and a half ago. You wouldn't think that based off me doing a 475 double, that back then I was doing a 445 for 4, because that would estimate me at about the same weight. But I pushed it too hard for too long without listening to my body, and it set me back about a year, But I had to take that on the chin and move on with it and adapt. Even though I spent a year not even really strength training and just, taking several weeks off at a time, working with the best I can, isolating it, strengthening it, doing any sort of variation possible just to feel something again click well with my knee. I finally figured it out after a year, and whether enough time had passed for what it could heal for, or whatever variation I did finally worked, all that work has built up to now, where I brought it back and I made the most growth I've ever had in my life. And it's not because I stuck to the same program for months and months on end. It's not because I did the same exact thing 1,000 times and eventually just finally fucking stuck. I changed and adapted every single day to the new person that I was every time I woke up. Every time you get out of bed, every time you walk in the gym, every time you add a weight to the barbell, even if it's just the barbell by itself, you're a new person. No matter how small, no matter how seemingly insignificant, every time I walk in the gym, when I start with that barbell, I treat that barbell as my max. I want to give that barbell as much attention as I do the 255, at least mentally something close enough to where it can transition over to each individual weight that I do the jump with. Because again, today, I failed 185 on the way up. A lot of people would have just kept going up because even if they failed it, because they know that they can do more. I will never go up unless I feel like the technique is there, I am mentally, physically confident, and I actually hit the weight for good technique. That it has to happen. And if I follow those prerequisites every single day, I can lift as hard and as crazy as I want, because I discipline myself to adhere to my body and then just strengthening whatever my body's potential is with whatever mental I can drag out with it, Because if you can have the worst physical day, but if technique is there and you're mentally hyped the hell out about it, you can make it work. Just like my snatch today. I know it's impressive. I know it's heavy. I know it's heavier than what I'm used to be doing. I'm still peaked, but it did not feel good. It felt like I was doing a 225 normal snatch heavy day from 2 months ago, because 225 was heavy 2 months ago. We're making moves. We're making a ton of growth, but you have to allow yourself to adapt every single step of the way. Even if it's in the middle of a program, even if it's in the middle of a session in that day, in the middle of a lift, you have to adapt every single time. Like when my shoulder started bugging out last week, I didn't do front squat and bench that day. It sucks, but there's no point in pushing it if I'm in genuine pain. Discomfort is part of the game. That's fine. Soreness and discomfort, you got to live with that and move on and be okay with being in a certain level of pain that is maintainable. But I can't maintain legitimate sharpshooting nerve pain. You got to let that one be. But physically, man, I can't believe it, truthfully. The snatch has definitely anchored it down a little bit because it just wasn't there the way that it was last week. But my main strength lifts with squats and snatch bounces, it's going crazy right now. I got to give it a solid 9.4. It's really good. I can't lie to myself. As it's weird. It's weird to be this physically apt when I know that my mental isn't that high today. Like mentally, it's going to be a 9.05. Just over the curve. I had a low-key day. I enjoyed myself. I vibed out. I'm still off work, which is nice. I go back tomorrow, and then I get back to the workaholic schedule. But it's been nice to just kind of breathe for a minute. I had no unnecessary hype today, and I'm very grateful for that sometimes. It keeps your head cool. You're going to have a logical, rational lift, and it really shows you where you're actually at in that moment. Anyway, back tomorrow. It'll be clean and jerk complex with front squat variation and bench press variation. Actually, no, sorry, front squat top single tomorrow. That's what it'll be because it's peak week. But, whatever works. I'm not going to push anything too hard. If my shoulder needs to chill out this week and no more max outs on any clean and jerk front squat bench, fine. I'll take that on the chin and I'll move on and I'll peak again next program. It doesn't matter. I will always have time to do more as long as I adhere to my body and my principles and my mindset. Let me know how the lives of the list will be going. Thanks for hearing me out. And I love you guys. I'll be back. See you later. Bye.